It's Monday, April 15th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It really is a hell of a day to talk ball today, because when I started to do this mock draft show, the whole idea of it, I wanted to aim high, okay? I wanted to get some heavy hitters. And we've had some heavy hitters on our Mock Draft Monday show, but I would argue that there is no bigger fish to reel in the NFL draft industry than one Daniel Jeremiah of NFL Network. And he is who's joining me to talk ball today. DJ, what's going on, buddy?
Well, I mean, when you're looking for an expert in this field and you think about a mock draft, 32 picks in the first round, and I guess on average, probably maybe 8 to 10 at the most correct. I mean, you shot for the moon here, man. Like you really went for it. Somebody that could get about, less than 30% of these things correct on a yearly basis.
Well, that's the beauty of this, DJ, is that the goal of this show is not to be accurate. It's not to try to predict exactly what's going to happen. We're trying to put a different spin on mock drafts. And if you're new to this series that we're doing here, I'm not trying to have the guest really pinpoint exactly where these players are going to go or make a perfect match. But I want to understand the thought process here, understand like why you loved a certain player to team fit, because I know DJ would definitely agree with this. As I've said with all of our guests, most people that do mock drafts have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with mock drafts, because we know they click. We know that people want to read them. We know that the fans, our loyal and dear fans and readers, have thoughts and opinions on each and every mock draft pick. That part can be good, but it can also be kind of an exhausting process. But the real fun part of it is, in my opinion, seeing like, all right, where does this team value this type of player? You know, what do they really need? And understanding, I think, both the draft prospects and the teams that are picking at all different ranges of the draft. So that's really the goal of this program. I have every guest come on, and DJ is going to do it today, and give me 5 of their favorite player to team fits from their most recent mock draft. And then we end with a little negativity. One pick that they made that was just to get it done in time for the editor, just to move on to the next pick. So DJ, before we jump into your 5 favorite picks here, I just kind of want to get a little thoughts from you in terms of your mock draft methodology. Like when you're putting together this thing, I mean, I think you have coined now one of the favorite, really famous draft industry quotes, which is, with your top 50, that's your eyes. Your mock draft is your ears. I've actually had multiple people reference that on this show so far during draft season. So kind of explain your methodology when you're putting this thing together.
Yeah, I mean, I always think about it as 2 distinctly different exercises. So the top 50 is my personal evaluation on the players, how I would stack them if I was the generic 33rd team in the NFL. That's how I see the players. I will defend my positions on those because they're based off of my opinions and the work that I've put in. Whereas mock drafts, there's a couple different ways to look at it. I absolutely do it with more what I'm hearing than what I would do in those situations. I never really do it. Well, I would do this if I was this guy. Like, I try and say, okay, this is what I'm hearing. Then I try and look at a little bit of the draft history, the guys making the picks. Is there any kind of tells or anything there? And then, the fact that you have to do a handful of these things. There's some where just out of pure curiosity, I'm like, well, we've all been saying that, this is going to go this way, but how does it, like, what's the domino? Like, if you take this one out and put this one in, then what are the repercussions here as you go along? So that's kind of the different ways I do it. The last one I do, I'll try and just do it with all the information, the last information that I have to try and put them in the right spots. But it's stuff that I've come around, because initially it was like, you're new in this, you're new in media, you put these out, you read your comments, and you're like, oh my gosh, these people think I'm the dumbest person on the face of the
Big
earth.
mistake.
Like, this is hurtful. And then you kind of graduate from that to being like, okay, it's like the different stages of maturity. Okay, I'm not going to look at it. I'm just not going to look at the comments. The content goes out. I don't look at it. To then getting to the point where, like, okay, I read the comments. It doesn't really hurt my feelings. Or it's just like, it is what it is. To now, like, I can't wait to see the comments. Like, oh my gosh, look at what this guy said, and kind of laugh it off, and I'll send it to buddies around the league, and we'll have fun with it. But I was on the phone last night with the general manager, Matt, and we were going over, okay, let's go through this section of picks. What do you think is going to happen? Okay, well, what if this guy goes here? Then when does the next player at this position go? Like, they're doing the same exercises that we're doing. So there is value in it.
Yeah, that point that you just made there is so crucial. And we talked about this, I believe, on the last Mock Draft Monday with Trevor Sikkema of Pro Football Focus, that even if this is sort of like a media exercise that people eye roll at, just the idea of a mock draft and like, okay, really, like, who cares, right? Whatever. But teams are doing this, and you would know this. Obviously, you've worked for multiple teams in the NFL. Teams are really doing this on the inside, like actually trying to go through these scenarios to sort of map out their own plans or just see how the draft might unfold.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. If we would go through exercises and say you're picking 15th, and say that you want make it simple, you want a receiver and a corner. And so you would sit there and say, okay, if we get to pick 12 and, we have 3 corners that we like and only 1 receiver that we like, we could move up for that 1 receiver knowing that it falls off a cliff after that because our receiver board, drops way down. Or we could say, okay, let's just hold our water. We want the corner. Now, if we get on the clock and there's 2 corners we like, we might be willing to roll the dice looking at the needs of the teams behind us and move back 4 or 5 spots with the hope that one of those guys is still going to be there when we pick. But you're constantly, as the draft is going on, you're evaluating those situations. And it's really helpful if you've done it ahead of time to say, okay, we kind of practice this, kind of like war games almost, right? Like you kind of like the maneuvering and that's taking place. And then that's how you adapt and adjust.
I feel like positional runs is where that really comes together. And I think last year's receiver class was a great example, right? Like they just all went boom, boom, boom in the first round. And then you get a team that wants a receiver and you're on the other end of that. If you're not prepared for when that run happens, you can really be left holding the bag. Last thing on this before we get into the specific picks. Again, this is sort of a meta question, I guess, DJ, but do you feel like fans of the draft are like stranger than ever now? Because I don't know if this is just because the receiver class is so good this year, and obviously that's the position I focus on more, but I go back and forth with people every day where they are just dead set that their team is taking this receiver and this type of receiver, and it's crazy to me that there's anyone like industry analyst or fan that approaches this event with any level of certainty, because you mentioned, I think, a few of your I don't know if it's this mock draft that we're going to talk about today or a few mock drafts ago, I saw you said like, yeah, I just chose chaos on this one. And like, why would you not, man? Because chaos is the ruler of the draft.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're going to get the unexpected. So you might as well have fun with it and enjoy it. But I do find it fascinating. Like, I talked to one of the quarterback teams yesterday, maybe it was 2 days ago, and they haven't even had the guys in yet. And I see all these reports about they are definitely taking this person or that person. I'm like, okay, look, they've done a lot of work on them. They, I'm sure maybe there's a position coach that has let it be known to those out there in the public of his desires and wishes. But the decision makers haven't nailed it down in terms of what they're doing. But yet somebody, some just Joe Blow is like, they are taking this guy. There's no chance they're not. I'm like, dude, I just talked to the guy who's running the thing yesterday and he doesn't know yet. So I don't know. I always find that there's 2 camps, right? And there's so much out there in terms of information for people now. They used to have to just rely on, Mel and Mayock. Like that used to be the only way people got their information. They sure as heck didn't have video. Now they can watch all these guys and they can see them broken down by really smart people. And so you have 2 camps. You have kind of the name brand camp of people who are like, I've been looking at Marvin Harrison on, every Saturday with my buddies watching him play. And I just know that he's who he is. And then there's other people that are in the niche group. They're like, I heard about this guy before all you guys did. And I knew, you know what I mean? So it's like you have those 2 camps and they're very strongly opinionated, but it's good dialogue. It makes it fun.
Oh, yeah. Listen, I love that part. And as someone that comes to the draft process extremely late, it's always fun to sort of, all right, once I do my work on a player, then I'll go seek out like other smart people's, like I'll read your top 50. I'll read other people's work. Like, oh, okay, like they actually see this player very similar to me, or hey, they have a very different view about this. And one guy that I know we agree on, we will talk about a little bit later. But let's waste no more time here, DJ.
Yeah.
Let's get into your 5 favorite player to team fits from your most recent mock draft, starting off with your first one. I'm very excited to hear about this one in particular. So let's dive into it, man.
Yeah, let's start. First of all, let's go with Joe Alt to the Tennessee Titans. When you watch Joe Alt, to me, he's like the fairway pick. Ozzie Newsome used to always say, In the first round, if you focus on doubles, hey, we're just going to hit doubles. Don't make mistakes. You can't afford to miss in the first round. If we hit it huge, hit the home run, that's great. But like, let's get solid doubles. Joe Alt to Tennessee, a team that is desperate for a left tackle. To me, that is the perfect fit. You also marry him up with a young quarterback. One of the things when you're looking at like mock drafts and looking at fits for teams, when general managers stake their claim on a quarterback and the decision comes down to maybe a need on the defensive side of the ball or a need to help my quarterback who I've stamped my approval on to play better, they are always 10 times out of 10, they are going to take the guy on the offensive side of the ball. So while you could make a case that, they could use this, they could use that, no bigger need than tackle. They have their pick of all of them. And I think to me, you take the safest one, that'd be Joe Alt.
Yeah, we do another series here on the podcast, like called Teams That Will Shape the Draft. And one of the ones that we were going to do closer to the draft is teams that I'm having a tough time figuring out. The Titans were going to be on that episode, and maybe I still have them on that episode just because, look, the content's planned out. It is what it is. But at the same time, now at the closer and closer we get to the draft, DJ, I feel like this pick has been... It's got to be one of the highest approval ratings for any mock draft pick in the top 10. It's got to be one of the ones that you see mock draft the most in terms of Joe Alt to Tennessee. And I feel like post free agency, post them signing Calvin Ridley, it really crystallizes as like, this is the biggest need on the roster. And Joe Alt specifically is the guy that is able to fill that need. Tell me a little bit about Joe Alt as a player, because like just what makes him, we've talked about a lot of other offensive linemen on this show, but I feel like we actually haven't hit on him as much just because it seems like this pick is kind of written in pen right now by everybody. But what makes Joe Alt a special player worth taking in the top 10 as an offensive tackle?
Well, when I pulled my notes on him, first of all, you just look at the dang size. I mean, he's almost 6'9", 321 pounds. He's long. So you start out with the fact he's enormous. He plays a really wide base. He's always under control. He's rarely on the ground. So he's got really good balance, which is a very good trait there. He's not an elite bender. Like he's not, like Laramie Tunsil to me is kind of the gold standard there of guys who can really bend and slide and move. He's not that. Is a little bit, he can be a little bit high at times with his size, but guys don't ever get into him. He's just so big and so long. He never gives up his chest, and he stays off the ground and he stays attached. So at the end of the day, I kind of look at people like, are you going to really move people? Or are you going to stay attached? And at the end of the day, I mean, it's nice to move people for sure, but at the end of the day, you stay attached, we're good. Like we are good. In the run game, he does a great job of that. And in pass protection, you're not going to get around him, and you're not going to get through him because he doesn't give up his chest. So he's not going to be as aesthetically pleasing as some other guys when you see him bend, slide, redirect, and all those things. But he's hit that profile. And obviously his dad played in the NFL forever. He's going to play forever. He's going to be a 10-year starter.
Let me play devil's advocate here for you and just kind of think about this exercise from a Tennessee Titans perspective. You're Rand Carthon, you're Brian Callahan. You've hired Bill Callahan, Brian's dad, who's a legendary offensive line coach. Do you think it's smarter if you have Bill Callahan in place who you trust to coach up the offensive line? You trust him to make this a great unit, besides the fact that he's your own father. That's why you wanted to go out and get him, right? I mean, it's a dream come true, but also it's a dream come true in multiple senses. You get to work with your dad. You have your dad work for you, which that should be a fun dynamic. You have your dad work for you, but also you get a dream offensive line coach. You get a guy that, like I said, can elevate this unit. Do you think it makes more sense to just like, hey, let's have him cobble together a group of guys and he'll make the unit into a workable unit, or let's get him an absolute superstar here and just maybe potentially see him kick that to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can jump out of the plane and trust the best parachute of all time, or you can throw a backup on there. To me, that's like Will Levis being successful is kind of going to hinge on their future there. So while I love Bill Callahan and I think he'll do a great job of elevating everybody's play, I'd rather remove some of the room for error and give him somebody who's already steady and ready to plug and play. And then we can use Bill Callahan to devote more of his time to trying to develop the rest of our group. But I just like the fact of having a pillar. And maybe that comes a little bit from my time when I was in the NFL, because I was on teams that had Jonathan Ogden. You never had to worry about helping him. I was on teams with Joe Thomas. You never had to worry about helping him. And I was on teams with Jason Peters. And it was a lot easier to build out the rest of the offensive line when you had the stalwart in place.
Yeah, I'm generally with you. Like I said, kind of a devil's advocate question, because to me, I always like the idea of if you have a elevator type of coach, like a guy that you think can make things better, make players better, put guys in positions to win, I'd always much rather take a B+ player and make him an A as opposed to a C+ player and make him a B-. And I think that's sort of what they're doing here with Joe Alt. Final question just on this pick overall. Okay, so let's say they get Joe Alt, they have DeAndre Hopkins, they have Calvin Ridley. Sounds like this group's not that high on Treylon Burks, which makes sense given what he's been in the league so far. But you have two receivers on the outside. Brian Callahan even said they're still kind of looking for a slot receiver. They have Chigga Okonkwo. They've got two running backs back there. They might have a functional offensive line. What do we think about Will Levis and the Tennessee Titans if they make this pick? Because I don't really have a strong opinion on Levis as a player, and I'm kind of like willing to believe anything at this point.
Yeah, I think he's someone, I mean, you say this about anybody, right? But I think you'll see a little different player when he's protected. If you go back to his time at Kentucky the year before he came out, when he had a little bit better wall in front of him, he can throw the crap out of it. I mean, he's got a huge arm, but he can get a little frenetic when everything gets a little busy. So I think being able to slow that down a little bit for him, I think you got a chance. Like that's my whole thing is, doesn't guarantee that Will Levis is going to be a good player or he's going to be a great player, but it gives him a chance. And, when you looked at where they were, I just didn't think with the group they had that, I mean, he did some good things last year, but he's not going to have a real chance to be anybody with what they had in front of him. So that to me felt like something they absolutely had to address. Yeah,
this gives him the best avenue to be the best version of himself. I'm not quite sure what that best version is, but this is the path to do it. Let me run this comparison by you because I said I don't have a strong opinion about Will Levis, and I said that to one of my co-hosts on the podcast, Andy Behrens, and then I proceeded to say, I feel like actually there's a way, like he could be this generation.
Oh, I've got a name. I'm anxious to see if it's yours.
Okay, I said like maybe he could be this generation's Jameis Winston.
I was going to go Jay Cutler.
Well, I mean, hey, we're it's kind of the same
same
bucket,
family,
the same family of quarterbacks there. And I can tell myself a story where maybe it's not winning football necessarily, but certainly from like a fantasy perspective and certainly from just like a fun perspective, a protected Will Levis back there dropping bombs to DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley kind of running these routes as the flanker receiver. I can see how this would be really fun football.
Yeah, I have a sports philosophy that extends beyond just football, and that is like the one thing you cannot be as a franchise is bad and boring. Okay, I mean, ideally you're good and entertaining, and then if you're good and boring, that's fine. I can be bad and entertaining. At least I leave the park going, okay, that was a fun night. But when you are like what the New England Patriots were last year, when you are that bad and you are that boring, like that is miserable. And it's not just miserable from the fans' perspective. It's deflating in the entire building. So if they're losing some games next year, 34-28, 34-30, and Levis, throws 3 to his guys and 2 to your guys, like at least we saw something here. It's like watching paint dry otherwise.
Yeah, DJ and I are very much cut from the same cloth when it comes to that opinion. I don't care how good you are, just be interesting, especially when I've got to talk about all 32 of these teams. Let's just be interesting. Speaking of things we agree on here, DJ, your second pick. Look, I know we see this player very similarly. Why don't you tell the people your second favorite pick, or player to team pick here that you really liked?
Yeah, I posted this when I first watched this guy, and I was kind of just going through the list of receivers that I had on the page that I had been given to watch. So I pop on Rome Odunze after I've already seen a bunch of the other top guys, and I'm like, I just gave Rome Odunze the same grade I gave Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, that's what I think of him as a player. And I don't know, like, when you're going through and you're taking notes and then you finish and you go back through and you're like, okay, let me pull out the negative here, because I want to, I'd give the full evaluation. Let's kind of find the negative. I'm like, I don't know what negative notes I really have here. He's such a complete player. He's big. He's always fast enough. People like to hammer him on the play speed. I'm like, he doesn't get caught. He knows when he needs to separate, he can separate, but he's also very comfortable on back shoulder throws and using his frame and going and getting the ball. So I didn't have any issues with his play speed at all. I see somebody who can play inside, he can play outside. I think he's got feel. I think there's a savviness to him, which normally in big guys, you tend to lose something, right? You're stiff, or you don't really have a feel or a savviness to you. Like, I got a big guy who can move, who's got feel, who's not restricted by any ankle or hip tightness. I'm like, I don't know. And then I called. So then I'm like, all right, well, before I like kind of push my chips in on this guy, like let me call some people that have been up there and are dialed in from the scouting side and get the background on him. And so I called about 3 or 4 different guys. And it was like, dude, it's off the charts. Like the work ethic is exceptional. He's incredibly intelligent. If Michael Penix called him at midnight and said, let's go throw, he's the first one down there. Like he's all ball. It's like, I'm like, well, this is easy. Like I'll go in on him.
So before we talk about the team here and the pick with the Bears, I want to talk a little more about the player because, like I said, I come to the draft process pretty late, but I did start working on prospects earlier than ever this year. And I had seen that quote, what you just said there, that you gave Rome Odunze the same grade that you gave Marvin Harrison. I'd seen that kind of aggregated around, when I'd first started charting prospects. And you can't be too careful on the internet these days, DJ, with these aggregators. All right. So I started my work on
authenticate it. Do you have to authenticate that comment?
I had to go to the source. I had to authenticate this because I had started my work on Rome Odunze. And I came to a lot of the same conclusions that you just did right there, which is show me the flaw. Like I'm not seeing one, especially. And then when look at reception perception and like start to stack my rankings up from the last 4 classes, he's right up there with like Marvin Harrison and Jamar Chase in terms of like the 3 best prospects, in my opinion, over the last 3 classes when you look at their reception perception profile. So I had to reach out to DJ and like, hey, I gotta authenticate this as a big J journo here. I need to just make sure that this is how you feel, because I'm telling you what, buddy, like I'm ready to join hands and dive off this cliff together, because that's how good I think this guy's film is. And then to hear you say that it's all backed up, with who he is as a person and as just a work ethic type of guy. It just, man, it just seems such a clear picture with this player.
Yeah, I just think of like, and we can get to the team here too, because I had him going to the Bears at 9.
Sure.
And again, we can weave a thread through here, right? Which is we have young quarterbacks. That's our resources. They're going to that. The Bears need a pass rusher, Jared Verse. I get all that. But if I'm Ryan Poles and we have the same record, say next year, say we're 8-9. And we're 8-9, and Caleb Williams throws for 4,000 yards, and Caleb Williams, has given our franchise hope, and maybe he throws 30 touchdowns for the first time in the history of the franchise. That's a different 8-9 than we took Jared Verse. We've got Sweat and Verse, and we're keeping the score down. And then the quarterback, we don't know what we have there yet with him. Some good, some bad. It's the same record, but it is a different trajectory for your franchise, and that's why, to me, it's like, man, you get a chance to add him to the guys you already have there. That's a no-brainer. And I just also feel like, as a GM, if you're saying, what's my good night's sleep pick? Like, what pick do I make? And then I don't wake up with a cold sweat worried about what we're going to look like here at the rookie minicamp. I'm like, this guy comes in clear packaging. Like, I've seen him do everything you need to do, and I know who he is as a person. Like, this would be an easy one to turn in.
In my opinion, he has a high ceiling as a player. I compared him to Devontae Adams in an aggressive comparison. I think like a more cautious comp for him is like Allen Robinson. And look, if he ends up being Allen Robinson, the guy led the league in receiving touchdowns one year. He had 1,400 yards. Like he was for a long time, a very, very solid, I would say, good to great starting X receiver in the league. And I think that's a pretty, like I said, cautious comparison for Rome Odunze, but I do see a lot of Devontae Adams in his game. So you're getting a little bit of that ceiling floor here with him. And I'm with you that if I'm Ryan Poles and I'm the Bears, I don't want to be chasing weapons with my young quarterback, because right now on paper, they have DJ Moore and they have Keenan Allen. That's a great duo. I love the way those two guys can work off of each other. That's fantastic. But Keenan Allen is 32 years old. Keenan Allen is on the last year of his deal. And like, I know you've watched a lot of Keenan Allen doing work with the Chargers. I've watched a lot of Keenan Allen the last couple of years. Had a great statistical season last year, but there's a clear decline, in my opinion, in his game, especially from a downfield standpoint. So are we going to, we could be looking at a scenario next year where either Allen's not on the team or he's another year diminished and there's not a lot of wealth of options behind him. So again, to me, I have Caleb Williams. I don't want to be sitting here in 2025 and thinking like, all right, we got to look for weapons for him again. Like, why not just get ahead of it when you have a rare opportunity here?
And the other thing I was thinking of, and having been around Keenan, is, can you imagine with Rome's size and his toolbox? We're going to put you in the room with Keenan Allen for the next year, and then you're going to get a freaking master's in route running. So that's going to benefit Caleb Williams for the next decade, not just for next year.
That's a great point. And I think their skill sets are a little comparable too. Guys that I do think Rome is certainly more explosive now than obviously Keenan Allen is, but even just at their peaks, I think he's a more explosive player. But there's similarities in the way that they run routes and the way that they set defenders up. I mean, we could really go 30 minutes here on Rome Odunze. That's just
love it. But he's like, when you watched him, I'm curious because I love when we get a chance to talk about wideouts, you do it so well. But like to me, there's two things I wanted to hit you on a wide receiver topic. But number one is when you watch guys like I don't even know how else to describe it. It's like this guy, like Keenan Allen to me is a basketball player on the football field. When I watch Rome Odunze, I think there's a feel and there's a movement there's a basketball player element to what they do. And so I'm like, okay, it's kind of like a basketball and grass thing. But that was my first thing. The second thing was did you see the video that the Rams put out about when they picked Puka and McVay is in there with Les? And McVay's describing exactly the role that he's going to play, has a plan for him, all those things. But the phrase that he used that I'm like, I've described around this many times, but I've never said it this succinctly. I'm like, I actually have talked to a bunch of people about this because I loved it so much. Was he talked about the thing I love about Puka is he's grounded through the catch. And I'm like, that when you see it. And like when you watch Rome Odunze, he hits it. He is full go running through the ball, cleats on the ground. It's one of the reasons why we talked about at the combine. Like Puka had the fastest combine gauntlet drill. Because if you think about it, if your feet never come up and if you're never jumping to catch a ball, then if you jump to catch a ball, you're hitting the brakes. When you're hauling straight down the line and catching everything because you're so confident in your hands, you run through the ball. You don't gather. You don't leave your feet. It's grounded through the catch. I'm like, what a great scouting phrase that I'm going to use many times over. But Rome Odunze is 100% grounded through the catch.
Yeah, there's two things to me that I think about with that quote and just the idea of being grounded through the catch. One, it's confidence in your route running. I think that's a part of it. Just confidence in your hands too. Overall, as a confidence as a player, I think in both phases, both in your hands and in your ability to like be in the right spot where you're supposed to be. Which I talked to Puka at the Super Bowl, and that was kind of what when he told me his favorite route to run was that dig cut, like on dagger and stuff like that, and just that Matthew Stafford saw that early in training camp or in mini camps was like, we need to get that guy the ball on this route specifically over and over and over again because his hands are in the right place. He's in the right place. So I think it's that confidence. And also it's just a fearlessness too, because like a lot of times when you're working that middle of the field specifically or working on boundary routes and in contested situations, you're going to get clocked a little bit. Not like you used to do in the old days, but you certainly are in a position where you can take a big hit. And I think both Puka and Rome Odunze have that like confidence and fearlessness to their game, which I think all brings it into that grounded through the catch. Just this is a tangent, and then we'll get back to Rome Odunze.
No, I love this. Yeah.
How do you feel about Keon Coleman in that way? Because he was the guy who had that fast gauntlet too.
Yeah.
And I feel like I actually have a very clear vision of how I feel about Keon Coleman, but I'm just curious because he was the guy that sort of got that comparison at the combine this year with that slow 40, but then a great gauntlet drill with the fast time and all that.
Yeah, he plays to his top speed, So, but there's no point in time when I watched him where I thought he played fast. I didn't think he necessarily played fast, but he plays to his top speed. And to me, he's got like you talk about catch radius and like acrobatics, like he can give you all of that stuff. He's in that lower tier. I was talking to a head coach who's an offensive guy about him, and he was trying to work through what his vision for the player would be. And he was talking about Juwan Jennings from the Niners. Like, I think I could use him in there, let him bully some people in the run game, and then we'll get the matchup that we want in the pass game where he can use his size and kind of work seams and work in the middle of the field. We can use him on some of those option routes. He just presents a big target when he's faced up with the quarterback too. So he's a tricky one. I think you have to know exactly what your role is for him and how you want to use him. But that's kind of where I saw him. Where did you end up having him?
Yeah, so I won't bore you with all of the stats. I can send them to you after the game, after the podcast. I'll send you some of the notes from Keon Coleman's RP profile. Although DJ has a reception perception subscription, by the way.
I do. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Endorser of the site, by the way. If you're new to the program, endorser of the site. But I showed some of the data in there that guys that I've charted in college that are below certain thresholds, like 35th percentile against man and press coverage, that's just struggle to separate at the collegiate level. You go through the names in reception perception history, most of these guys are flameouts. Most of these guys are guys that didn't work out. There's 5 players that are like inarguable hits to me. They are all 5 big slot receivers. It's like Rashee Rice, guy that played on the perimeter at SMU, moved inside and kind of ran these like big crossing routes as a rookie. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who I think struggled on the perimeter at USC, but you could see him transition to that power slot role. It's like Juju Smith-Schuster back at USC. And you bring up Juwan Jennings. In terms of the 49ers receivers, he led the team in percentage of snaps from the slot, 57.7%. Again, that's not the majority, or that is the majority. It's not like he's a slot-only player. I don't think Keon Coleman needs to be a slot-only player, but I think he diagnoses zone coverage well. Like, I think there are certain routes that he runs, again, crossing routes, dig routes, slant routes. He's fine enough from a separation standpoint against zone coverage that you get that big guy like rolling across the field and you let him bully people a little. I can see the vision there. So he's been a guy that I've been saying, I will tell you with much more confidence how I think Keon Coleman's career is going to play out the day after he's drafted, as opposed to right now, because I'll figure like what team and how like that fits in that receiver room. Cause I just don't think he's a guy you want to play out at X receiver and have him win jump balls. To me, you got to have the right type of quarterback for that. Most teams don't have the right type of quarterback for that. So I've ended up somewhere like kind of around receiver 10 with him, just because there are other guys I like more in the class. But a guy that, depending on what you need in your room, like if you're the Bengals, that's the team I keep coming back to. If you're the Bengals and you lost Tyler Boyd this year, if he's around in the second round, you're also kind of thinking like, what's the future with T. Higgins? That would be a guy I'd like to add to the room in that scenario. And you have a quarterback that has confidence to rifle the ball in like 50-50 situations as well.
Can I give you the marriage? We can just put this together right now as I'm looking at it. So the Denver Broncos don't have a second round pick. The Denver Broncos have been talked about as a quarterback team, obviously need to retool the offense. So let's just do this. Denver Broncos trade down from 12. They find their way somewhere in the mid-20s. They take Bo Nix, who's going to be able to be the facilitator that Sean Payton's always been used to. Then you get an extra second-round pick in that mix. You take Keon Coleman, who my comp for him was Marcus Colston.
Yeah,
that's who it was. And Sean Payton knows exactly what to do with this type of player.
Oh, I mean, I think that's perfect.
If this happens, by the way, you better clip this off. And you better post that thing.
Colin, Brett, put the note in the doc. We clip this off if that happens, especially the trade down part, because you're not the first person that's brought up Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, and I do really see how that can work out. And I kind of like Bo Nix a little bit at working on Troy Franklin. Like he's fine. He's all right, and I think how he can make sense in Sean Payton's system. And yeah, I don't think he is like I've seen some people compare Keon Coleman to Michael Thomas. I don't see that, just because Michael Thomas could win against press as an X, but I think in that sort of Marcus Colston role, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I tell you what, like that is a great situation where, hey, if our magic scenario comes to fruition here from like a dynasty draft perspective, from a fantasy perspective, I'm going to be much more interested in Keon Coleman there, as opposed to if he goes to like, I don't know, let's say Dallas or something, who needs an outside receiver. They're not going to move CeeDee Lamb out of that slot position. And like, oh, great. Now we're having Dak Prescott throw tight coverage passes to Keon Coleman. So that's where just landing spot with these players matters. But let's just put one final bow here on Rome Odunze. What do you think from like just in his rookie year? As much as we like Rome, DJ Moore's a good player. Keenan Allen is still who he is. He's still working with a rookie quarterback. Like, how do you think the distribution of that room would go in their rookie season specifically? I'm with you that it's great for the long term, but could we be looking at like another Jackson Smith and Jigba situation, DJ, where, really good player, but he's not going to pass up the two veterans in year one?
Yeah, the difference is, to me, I think that Rome will show up in the red zone. So to me, he would be their best. He would walk in the building, even with those two great receivers, he would be their best option and target down the red zone. So let Keenan get the volume. That's what Keenan's majored in. You're going to get some explosives out of DJ Moore. You know, is obviously a great all-around player, but you're going to get run after catch, all those things. To me, I think at least initially, you'll feel Odunze more once you get in the red zone, and you'll feel him on some big third downs. I mean, Caleb's got an unbelievable amount of confidence, especially on drive throws outside. Like, let him throw back shoulders to him, in the red zone, let him wall guys off on slants. You think about the RPO stuff you'll be able to do with the running game that they are going to have. With Caleb has the quickest hands. To me, him and Tua have the quickest hands of any quarterbacks I've ever evaluated, because they kind of grew up in the RPO era. So, man, that's going to be fun to watch. Caleb just pull the ball out real quick and whip a slant to Odunze, and I think that's where you'll feel him in that offense with that group. I think you'll feel him in the red zone.
I think that's really smart. I thought you were just going to go, the difference to me is that I like Jackson Smith-Njigba. I think you like Jackson Smith-Njigba as a prospect. Rome Odunze
is a different caliber player.
He's just a much better player. But I kind of like that idea that if that's the receiver core for Chicago, we could see, like, I don't know, something like Keenan Allen leads the team in catches, DJ Moore leads the team in yards, but like I wouldn't be surprised if Rome Odunze leads the team in touchdowns in year one, just because he's that presence in the red zone. All right.
Know who would piss off? You know who that would piss off, though? It would piss off the tight ends, because Kmet and Everett, like that's the production that he's going to pull from. He's going to pull from those guys.
I'm fine with that.
You don't have a tight end. You don't have a tight end website yet, do you? That's what I'm getting at.
Don't even, dude, DJ, don't even don't throw the meat into the water with that one, man. You would be surprised with how many people it's like, when are we getting the Brock Bowers profile? You're not. Like, I know we're all more flexible with positions than ever these days, but you seen the receiver list in this class? I got enough work to do, okay? I'm trying to stay a happily married man. Like, we had tight end perception to the site. It's over. Like, file the divorce papers tomorrow.
Dude, I got Mikey M on live TV the other day, where he took me literally, because we were talking about, I think we were talking about the Chargers, and I had them maybe trading down, or I had them taking something other than a receiver. And he goes, well, what are they going to do? You lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I go, Yam, look under your chair. And he literally looked under his chair. I didn't know you were going to literally do that. But there's 3 receivers under there. They're everywhere. They're always going to be everywhere. Like, every year we're going to see, I'm going to have 10 in my top 50 for the next 20 years. Like, that's what we're given.
Yeah. Receiver business is booming, man, which is great.
Yeah.
Which is great. We love to see it. Hey, you mentioned we're talking Rome Odunze here. Your next pick is actually his quarterback. Which team are we sending Michael Penix to that you really loved in your most recent mock draft?
Yeah, I've been saying this one for a while. I think there's a lot of folks throwing it out there now, but to me, the Raiders it felt like that to me. I think of him, just the Raiders and their DNA, and obviously there's been different coaches and general managers over the years, but and even a new owner. But it's at its core, the Raiders are they're a physical team, and they're an explosive passing game, and they're pushing the ball vertically down the field. I don't know. I mean, you having charted it, I know you saw it, but how many times last year did you see Devontae Adams stutter goes or sluggoes just freaking wide open, and the ball can't find him,
more than I'd like.
Yes. So to me, like, he can capitalize on that. So I just thought it fit there. I also like the fact of him, playing indoors and playing in good weather, where him and his meat hook hands and that, in freaking ridiculous arm that he has. Like, there's no blade of grass or turf, I should say, that's safe inside Alliance Stadium if he's in that offense.
Meat hook hands definitely in the top 5 of like weird draft terms that probably get thrown around in the building.
Like, I can't stop looking at it. Like it like, to me, it would be like, this is the chapstick is the football, and it's like you watch him. It's just like he swallows the whole ball with his hands. They're enormous.
Yeah. You were, to your credit, DJ, a lot of people have started to come around on this like Michael Penix Raiders connection. Probably so many now that it's just not going to happen, because that's, of course, that is how the draft works. But to your credit, I remember one of your early mock drafts that you had this, and I remember your blurb on it. I think I've brought it up on the show of like, Michael Penix fits the Raiders style of football. And that challenged me to think about, because I'm a little like back and forth on Penix. I'm curious what your just opinion is on the player, but I'm a little like back and forth on Penix. My overall thought has been, hey, if this was 1995, I think he'd be a top 10 quarterback, because I think you sit him back in a clean pocket and you just ask him to launch it all over the field. Then I think about the Raiders. I'm like, you know what? I think they kind of need somebody to just drop back and not be, no disrespect, but not be Gardner Minshew and kind of take the little lollipop passes and threaten every blade of grass like that. So, you have Devontae Adams. You want to maximize Devontae Adams right now. Yeah, I love Jacoby Myers. I think he's so underrated as a receiver. So you have a guy just dropping bombs to those two players, I can see the vision on that, which, like I said, everybody sort of come around to, but you were kind of the first one I saw put this out there.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I'm curious to see what, you get a new coordinator coming in, so there's going to be some changes there. But, and obviously the Josh Jacobs not being there is a big part of it. But I still think that's how their offensive line is built more to run the ball at this point in time than they are as a pass protecting offensive line. So then you say, well, gosh, that doesn't work. You got an immobile quarterback and you've got a run blocking offensive line. But I think if they put themselves in favorable situations, and it's going to be should be a play action heavy offense where they're trying to live over the top of the defense. And the other thing with that is he's my sixth quarterback to answer that question. So I think he's my 34th overall player, my sixth quarterback. So 13, that coffee's a little rich there for me personally. But I always just go back to like the first mini camp test. And I'm like, if you go out there for the first mini camp and you just arrived from another planet, and you're going to watch Gardner Minshew throw next to Aiden O'Connell, next to Michael Penix, you're going to go, well, he's the best one. Like, he throws it much better than those guys do. So I just think it's an opportunity to upgrade the position.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense with just regardless. Regardless of my kind of hesitations of him as a player, I do understand. Like, 13 is definitely rich for sure. I would be curious to.
It's a get out. Yeah.
I'll be dialed in. I know the nation will be dialed in on what's Daniel Jeremiah's reaction, when Penix goes off the board 13th overall. But shoot, I mean, even if they
hold up. Let me ask you this, because I talked to a team about. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but if you're his former offensive coordinator in Grubb, and you're sitting there in Seattle, Gino's 33 years old. I don't think Sam Howell's presence is going to keep you from taking anybody. But like because I was talking to a team about this, and I said, well, if the Raiders like Penix, just slide back. And they're like, I wouldn't slide if they like Penix, I wouldn't slide back past Seattle. And I'm like, huh. So, and then I was like, obviously, it's his coach. It's his coach. He walks in, he knows the system. You think about their presence to get vertically down the field with their assortment of weapons. Like, I mean, that's an interesting fit there too.
I think that my number one prediction for the 2024 NFL season is that the Seattle Seahawks is going to become like the football hipster tape grinder favorite team, but just because this offense, like, whether it is successful or not in the NFL, I mean, it's not going to be the same. Like, Ryan Grubb's not going to do the exact same thing that he did in Washington, but I think a lot of the concepts will be the same. I think a lot of the ways they attack teams will be the same. And like, that is going to be fun to watch. And I could see if you're Ryan Grubb just going to John Schneider and be like, hey, look, the Geno thing is great for right now, but Penix can be a guy that can do this for us for the next 3-4 years. Like, once we get past the Geno era. So I can see that. And the fact that they're picking 16, I guess it's sort of similar, DJ, right? Where people say, hey, if you like the quarterback at 10, you should just take him at 1, or you take him at 2, or take him at 3, or take him at 4, whatever. I guess if you like the quarterback at your second round pick, you take him at 13. It's still rich, but hey, I don't think you can straight face walk into training camp and say, we are having a competition between Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell, and give me your money for season tickets. That I don't think that puts butts in the seats.
Yeah, no, that's why I kicked around the idea the other day we were talking on the podcast, which was, hey, if Drake May goes 2 to Washington, and say they end up taking him over Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels gets to 3, I could see the Raiders at least giving swinging the bat as hard as they can to try and get Jaden Daniels at 3, just because they become an infinitely watchable product if that were to take place. Obviously, reunite him with his guy who recruited him to Arizona State, Antonio Pierce. So there's a lot of connections there that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah, I will be definitely putting in the research on Devontae Adams' success rate on slot fade routes, if that is the case. But all right, we're going to toss to a quick break here. We come back, we do our final 2 favorite picks from Daniel Jeremiah's most recent mock draft. All right, we're back. Give me your 4th favorite player to team fit here, DJ.
Yeah, I'm going to go Latu to the Rams. Latu. It's look, you save the team some airfare, right? So he's just got to drive over from UCLA. But I think a lot of people have looked at the Aaron Donald retirement and said, well, they've got to replace Aaron Donald, which nobody can do, but they've got to go defensive tackle. I'm like, I actually kind of like, obviously Kobe Turner was great last year. Mm-hmm. They've got some intriguing pieces inside. To me, it's getting an edge rusher and, getting a polished edge rusher to complement what they were able to do last year. Last year, I mean, that was a home run. Not only do you get the inside pass rusher, but they go to Tennessee and they get the outside pass rusher. Now, Latu, I just love that mix of putting him in the mix with all these young guys that they have and let a very talented, cheap defensive line kind of grow up together. And if I've got to lean one way or another in terms of being a physical edge setting presence on the end or someone who's going to have extreme value in passing situations, if Matthew Stafford's my quarterback and we're trying to make our last ditch run here, I'm going to jump all over that pass rusher to complement what I already have.
Yeah, I mean, Von Miller was their finisher a couple of years ago when they won the Super Bowl. I feel like Latu could be the same. I've kind of gone on a little bit of a journey with him as a player too, just because I heard a really good comparison from Deontay Lee of The Athletic. He said like Latu is kind of the edge version of these receivers that have all these moves, right? Like Jerry Jeudy in the offseason. You see him on Instagram shirtless, like with all these little footwork things. Then you get into the game. It's like, all right, well, that doesn't really work. But Latu, I think, is definitely kind of teach tapey in terms of his work as a pass rusher. There's just obviously some other red flags here with him, with the medical retirement, all that type of stuff, his journey and the whole thing. But I can see him making sense as the Rams here, just because like they need a difference maker on that defense. They've got some guys that I think are under the national radar, but are pretty good. So you see him being sort of that like finishing piece here, not finishing piece, but maybe that potential finisher for them.
Yeah, it's Byron Young, by the way. I was trying to think of his name from Tennessee, who played well last year. I think they were like 1 and 2 in rookie sacks. So yeah, no, I do. To me, I've used a little bit of the comp of Trey Hendrickson and there's a defensive line coach who you'll know is one of the most respected, that's ever coached in the game. And he was like, when these guys have sack production going back to 9th grade, and that's all they do is sack the quarterback, like this is, well, as much as I love get off and explosion and bend and those things, like it's still a craftsman, position. And there's certain guys that just know how to rush. And he is real. I mean, that's the thing is you can look at him and go, okay, I don't really see him just run right through your chest. So there's not like that insane power to build off of. I don't see him just win with pure speed, but he knows how to rush. He's got an unbelievable feel. If you overset, you're done. Like he is going to cross your face and get home. He's excellent with his hands. He's got all the tricks in the bag. He doesn't, like I was talking to a team in the AFC North and we were having this discussion and it was versus Latu. And he was like, look, AFC North, like versus he's more for our division. Like we need people that can kind of bang and it's going to be, it's just a different style of football. I talked to somebody else in another division and he was like, well, we would take Latu. He's just a more polished pass rusher. So I think there's some nuance there to the evaluation. And I think you kind of hit on a good theme when you were talking earlier about Keon Coleman. It's like everybody wants to say, what's this guy going to do? What do you expect from him in year one? Well, let me find out where he goes. Like, let me see how he fits in and we'll then discuss what we expect the production to look like.
And speaking in that division, particularly the NFC West, I can see a lot of like fireworks offensive performances in that division, right? Between Rams, Niners, the Seahawks, if that offensive vision that we talked about before the break kind of comes to fruition there and they're throwing the ball all over the yard, even if it's, they're not a perfect team. Even Arizona, like if they land that A-tier receiver and Kyler Murray's healthier coming back off an ACL. I kind of like Michael Wilson as a second receiver. Trey McBride broke out last year. Having this guy that just like, all right, go hump the quarterback. Like this is fourth quarter, hump the quarterback and win this game for us. I think that can make a lot of sense if we're thinking about the division stuff in particular. So, all right, let's go to number 5 here. Your number 5 player to team fit that you really loved.
Well, I was talking to somebody yesterday about this. We were going through the scenarios at the bottom of the first round, top of the second round. And like, who is going to go where and how do you think this will fall? And I'm like, well, I can't predict the Ravens. And they're like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, it's going to be a great player that's going to fall to him. It happens every year. Like you're not anticipating he's going to be there. And then lo and behold, there it is. So this one was like Cooper DeJean. And, to me, the Ravens defenses, you start with kind of, they've always had kind of that same mentality going back to when I was there I was there in 2003. So right after their Super Bowl run of 2000, but there's just a certain type of personality that fits in there. And this dude is that, like in terms of tough, versatile, smart, explosive, like all those kind of core traits. Like we used to always, on every player, we had to put what we called like an STI rating on him, which was speed, toughness, and instincts. And if you were on a scale of 3 to 7, which was what we used, 3 poor, 4 below average, 5 average, 6 above average, 7 excellent. Like if we're going to go speed, toughness, instincts, Cooper DeJean might be a 777. Like he's across the board in all three of those areas that they care about. They've since added character into there, and that's, he's a 7 there as well. So he fits everything, and they want to be multiple, and they want to bring guys from all over the place. And one play he can cover in the slot. I think he can hold up outside if you want him to. He hasn't played a ton of safety, but I could, I compared him a little bit to Weddle. Weddle was playing corner and covering Calvin Johnson at Utah back in the day. But like you can look at his skill set and be like, well, that'll translate easy. So that to me just felt like a Raven. And I also go back to the Ravens. Let's see, Marshall Yanda, Iowa hit. Let's go with Linderbaum, Iowa hit. Geno Stone, Iowa hit. Kirk Ferentz is very close with Eric DeCosta to the point where when Eric DeCosta would go scout Iowa back in the day when I was there, he would stay at Kirk's house. So like that's all the connective tissue that make that a good fit.
Well, that stuff definitely matters when we're talking about trying to map this stuff out, where these guys going to land. The connective tissue matters a lot. I'll tell you what, just from what you said up at the top, that it feels like the Ravens every year get the A+ draft grade because they take someone who fell a little too far in the first round, someone whose name everyone knows and every draft analyst likes. It feels like every draft analyst loves Cooper DeJean. I mean, and we had Nate Tice on the first mock draft Monday, and I feel like he was just gushing about him going to the Rams. And it's like everybody that watches these defensive players seems to really appreciate his skill set. So that is a perfect Raven fit, just from the intangible and then the tangible, just like media stuff. People are going to love that pick. I'm curious if they take Cooper DeJean, they have Kyle Hamilton, it's probably going to be about the same system, right? But they did lose Mike McDonald, who did such a great job disguising coverages. Like they could just throw so much at you last year. How do you see that personnel sort of playing out if indeed it is Kyle Hamilton, Cooper DeJean? Like where are these guys lining up?
Yeah, to me, I just think about the fun you'll have in sub, because I think Cooper DeJean can be your nickel backer. You have him and Roquan Smith out there together would be kind of fun watching them play off of each other. And then you've got Kyle Hamilton, who can be your big nickel. You can flop them in those situations. You're going to have a hard time IDing people with that skill set that they have. So to me, I think, how would they deploy them? I think it would be a week-to-week basis, and they can do whatever the heck they want. And it's just trying to collect as many versatile pieces as you can. To me, that's what's been the magic about that system, and that's why the Michigan system and the Ravens defense are the two going to be. You'll see it next year in college and in the NFL. Will be the two most copied defenses that we have. Everybody's enamored with it. You
better have the right players to do it. That's one of those systems to me. And this would ensure that the Ravens can continue to have the right players to run that system. And man, I mean, just the NFL is all about the middle of the field right now. Like, can you win that middle of the field battle? So much of playoff matchups we talked about on this show, Lions versus 49ers, like who's going to win in that middle of the field, right? I mean, just think about the way the Chiefs dominate over the middle of the field with Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce. You get Cooper DeJean kind of hawking around that area. You already have Kyle Hamilton do that. You put Roquan Smith in there as well. That's how you try to own that middle of the field and make that a very tough place for quarterbacks to want to throw the ball. And it's already a risky place for quarterbacks to throw the ball.
Well, I mean, and you've seen it in charting it. Like everybody plays with a roof now, so there's a roof line. You can't just win consistently like that over the top. So you have to work in that. We always call it the muddy area. Like you just got to figure out a way to win in the mud. And the more people you can clog that up, that's why one of the other trends I'm curious to see as football continues to grow and evolve is, are you going to start to see teams play with off the ball linebackers that are like 6'5", 6'6", with long arms, and just say, this is what we're going to be doing. If we're going to play with a lot of too high coverage, and we're going to put a lid on everything, I want you talk about clogging up lanes with speed. How about with just size and length?
Yeah, literally clogging
everything up. Yeah. And then which is then fascinating, because you've got Jim Harbaugh coming back into the NFL. It's saying, okay, everybody wants to worry about all that stuff. We're going to just go 12 and 13 personnel and just try and run power 60 times a game. So it's a fascinating chess match in the NFL right now.
By the way, it's going to be incredible how people react to it when it works with Jim Harbaugh. Like when they have Justin Herbert back there and they're just running the piss out of the ball, man. It's going to be funny when that like wins them games and how that's going to break a lot of brains out there. I love that idea of these 6'4", 6'5" linebackers out there. And, you know, God willing, DJ, you and I are still doing this in 10 years. And like, that's when we'll probably see that. We'll come back to this conversation right here and be like, yep, DJ called it. Like these linebackers are friggin' 6'4" and 6'5" now. And I mean, that'll be pretty incredible. And you're right. Like, everybody plays the roof. I'm sure the number one phrase my subscribers are sick of hearing, and like my listeners are sick of hearing me talk about, is like, this guy's dig route success rate is. I'm like, but you got to do it. You, like,
that's the NFL.
Receiver, yeah, you got to be able to run that dig route and work over to the middle of the field. But all right, that was some real positivity there. We have to end with one little. I'm not going to call it negativity, but we know how this thing is. Your final pick here, DJ, was one that you made in your most recent mock draft that like you made it, but you didn't love it.
Yeah, and you know, I think you phrased it well there. Like Nate Wiggins is really talented. I could make a case if you just watch him cover, he's the best pure cover guy in the entire draft. Out of Clemson, he's long, he's lean, he ran the 4.2s. You know, he showed up at the combine, he was in 173 pounds. He put some weight back on for his pro day. That's not the issue for me. But I have him going to the Philadelphia Eagles because they have a screaming need at the position, and he can really cover. However, personally, I've just kind of gotten away, and I've kind of pushed guys down over the last several years that aren't tackling corners. Like, you used to be able to play with guys who didn't really tackle. And I think, you know, my theory on it is you know, when McVay kind of took over this league and Shanahan took over this league, and then their tree expanded massively, reduced splits, bringing corners into run fits more so than they've ever been before. And you can't hide those guys anymore, man. And they're just going to leave him unblocked. You're going to make him the force player, and it's a nightmare. So to me, I've pushed those guys down a little bit, those pure cover corners that I didn't trust to be able to get guys on the ground. And I'm not talking about being a trained killer in there and knocking the guy's mouthpiece out. I'm just get him on the ground. I don't care how you do it, but just find a way to get him on the ground. So that was my hang up with him as a player. And I've over the last 5 years or so, there's been some other guys that have been drafted above where I had him at that position. I was comfortable with it because I didn't love that aspect of it. And for the most part, that's carried over.
I worry two reasons with like this particular pick, Wiggins specifically Philadelphia. One, you mentioned the Shanahan McVay style coaching tree, bringing corners into the run game. I mean, the 49ers already smack around the Eagles enough as it is, because they threaten their linebackers on the edge. Now you're telling me we've got a corner on the outside who's not going to really get involved in the run game either. I mean, good night, Deebo Samuel on the edge again, Christian McCaffrey on the edge again, like being able to threaten him that way. And the second thing is, and I think Howie Roseman's a sharp general manager, but we do know that general managers can get like very focused on these micro things. And again, I don't think Howie's this type of guy, but I think about how the Jags seem to always, the last couple of free agency cycles, they've just signed the guy that's crushed them in wide receiver. They signed Gabe Davis. One of his only 200-yard games last year came against Jags. If you look back when they gave Christian Kirk all that money, and I like Christian Kirk, he's a good player. Yeah. They gave Christian Kirk all that money. His best game came against the Jacksonville Jaguars the year before he hit free agency. I do wonder if the Eagles could actually look at this and think, and it's sort of, I'm galaxy braining myself a little bit here, but look at this, I can see across the division how Washington took Forbes last year. Thin, small, cover corner. And you know what they did? They lined up A.J. Brown against him every single time and just like, hey, good luck, buddy. Like, yeah, maybe you can cover this guy from a route perspective, but he has like 60 pounds on you. And I just wonder if there could be a similar, like, we don't actually want that to happen to us here as the Eagles.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And to me, it's not even just somewhat the size. Could like Rakestraw is one of my favorite players in the draft. I actually have him rated over Wiggins, and he's 181, 182 pounds. But that is a feisty, aggressive, outstanding tackling 183 pounds. Like I don't have any concerns about him in that department. So, you know, that's a great point that you bring up there, and maybe that would be enough to dissuade him from doing that. But it's one of those deals when you're filling out these mock drafts and you're like, okay, man, they have a screaming need at corner. Who's in the mix there? And that was one that I said I wouldn't necessarily do that. But let's get to the rest of the mock draft, put him in there, and let's move on.
Well, hey, that's what the mock draft is, man. It's not with your eyes, it's with your ears. And, that makes a lot of sense from a team needs perspective. Well, DJ, this was absolutely electric. I think we could have had probably like a Rogan-style podcast here and gone for 4 hours, specifically on some of this receiver stuff. But I know you've got a Padres game you got to mentally prepare yourself for in many hours from now. So there is that. But, hey, appreciate you doing this, number one. Number two, I don't think people need it. I don't think people need to know where they can find your work or what you're working on leading into the NFL draft, because you kind of are the NFL draft, buddy. But tell the people what you got cooking up here as we head into the NFL draft.
I appreciate that. That was like a Hot Ones close right there. I like that. I like that line of questioning. To me, if you want to find what we're doing, that's the podcast Move the Sticks with my buddy Bucky Brooks. We've been doing it forever. So you can check that out wherever you listen to podcasts. And then draft week. We'll be on NFL Network pretty much all week, 3 days. I think we've got puppies coming back. So I think day 3, we've got puppies, one of which peed on me last year. So we're going to try and stay dry for round 6 and 7 this year. That's my goal.
Well, for you personally, because you're my friend, I hope that you stay dry. I hope that doesn't happen. From a pure TV perspective, I mean, that would be pretty compelling. 2 years in a row. 2 years in a row, DJ.
I think I know what Charlie and the production team is rooting for, and it's not me smelling like $1 million as we navigate pick 240.
Well, hey, appreciate you once again, DJ. Yeah, if you are subscribed to this podcast and you're not subscribed to Move the Sticks, I mean, what are you doing with your life? So make sure you get that done, especially as we head into the draft, and critically after the draft, because that's where the real big boy analysis takes place. Like the actual, hey, how this is going to play out now that the picks have been turned in. That is going to do it for this episode of Mock Draft Monday. Tomorrow, we continue our teams that will shape the draft series. We're looking at the teams with 10 plus picks in this year's draft. Jordan Vanek joins me to break that down. Until then, we're out.